Hey to all Metal Maniacs, and welcome to another episode on Album of the Week, where I choose an album from my collection and say my thoughts about it and how it has left an impact on me throughout the years. For this episode I have chosen an album from a classic heavy metal band, but released recently in 2010 after a 16-year hiatus from this band. So it was kind of a comeback album. A lot of people were waiting for this album at the time, I remember. So let's see what the general consensus is of this album and what is my personal opinion about it. Also, this band on this album has presented a new vocalist, replacing an iconic figure in the heavy metal scene. So that was an added curious factor at the time, also to see what kind of vocalist this band would present us with and the general outcome of this record. I have listened to the 80s albums of this band, 80s, 90s albums of this band religiously, so I was, as I said, really eagerly awaiting the release of this record at the time. So without further ado, let's go straight to the opening theme and share my thoughts about this album that I decided to choose for this episode. Thanks again for joining us on this video. Our aim on this channel is to promote bands, review albums, review festivals, talk about anything concerning the cultural aspect of heavy metal and much more. So if you feel that this content is right up your alley, please subscribe and like this content and share our videos on social media in order to increase the number of our family, and it will be possible for us to share the word of metal much more. As you have clearly seen from the video title, for this episode I will be speaking about the album Blood of the Nations from the legendary German classic heavy metal band Accept. It was released in 2010 with Nuclear Blast Records. I don't know about you, but whenever, as I said, a classic heavy metal band that I really love aims to release an album in recent years at least, and after, in this case, 16 years hiatus from the band with a new vocalist, you have all the ingredients to remain cautious and not get ahead of yourself once you read the news of a new album from such a band of this status. It's like there is a conflict within myself to balance out the excitement whilst keeping myself grounded, not to be disappointed by the final product, and this helped me over the years protect myself from some total disasters from bands which I still love, but that particular album is not really up to the standard which I expect from such a band. But with regards to this album, it is really not the case. From the first second of this record, you are introduced to crunchy guitar riffs, amazing guitar solos, powerful drumming, and the great vocals of Mark Tornillo, who was replacing a heavy metal icon like Udo Dirk Schneider. Udo has such a status in heavy metal in general that there are some people who refuse to listen to the albums by Accept which don't feature Udo himself. Needless to say, Mark Tornillo on here does a very good job, amazing. I think he's one of the best replacements ever to another iconic figure, in this case in the vocals department. He's not that different from Udo though, but not really the same. It's like a mix of Udo and Brian Johnson of AC/DC. This complements the music by Accept. The guitar duo of Wolf Hoffman and Frank Herrmann really shines on this album, and Peter Baltes on bass, as usual, very consistent musician and always delivers a great job. And behind the drums there's the addition of Stefan Schwarzman, who had already experience with Running Wild on the album Port Royal and with the solo project of Udo himself. So this lineup brings a lot of experience, no doubt about that, great musicians, and it's like the best ingredients for a great album. But obviously that isn't always the case. Great musicianship does not always equal great records, as everyone who's listening knows really well. That kind of question mark before putting this album on still remains, but as I said, as soon as the first seconds start and we are introduced to the track Beat the Bastards, I mean, the title of that track and the first few moments kind of sweep away every doubt anyone should have about this album being up to standard. This is a record which again exemplifies what Accept are all about. No frills, no gimmicks, straight to the point, no kind of experimentation, or although there are some tracks in here which have something different from the usual Accept, but it really fits well with the whole flow of the album. There is an instant maturity feel in this album from the band. You can feel that these musicians have had their fair share of experience, but they don't lose that youthful anger, that youthful appetite to make an imprint on the music scene, and that mix really creates something beautiful on this album. As I said, there is a little experimentation here, especially on the track Shades of Death, which we are introduced to it by an orchestral background and even some touches of violin throughout, orchestral, not solo violin, so to speak. But it doesn't bother me. I'm not a big fan of mixing orchestra and heavy metal, although I do love classical music and I follow it really well. But if I want to listen to heavy metal, I want the heaviness, the power of heavy metal. If I want to listen to classical music, I listen to classical music. I don't love mixing genres that much. Again, this might be a subject for another video, but if I want to listen to heavy metal, I want heavy metal. And if I want to listen to jazz, I listen to jazz. If I listen to other styles of music, I listen to other styles of music. But heavy metal is heavy metal. And I wanted to reach that part of me where I want the aggressiveness, the violence, that roughness, that rawness. That is what I want from my heavy metal. The other kind of different track from the rest of the album, apart from Shades of Death, is Kill the Pain, which is a ballad, beautiful lyrics. On here, Mark Tornillo uses more of a lower register voice, and his voice in a lower register is much smoother, much calmer to a certain extent. But he has that kind of moments where he changes from that smooth style to a rougher edge. I think that's what makes his vocals so listenable, because there is that kind of change, that kind of emotional change that complements the music that is going on around him. But then when the Accept War Machine goes full guns blasting, you have tracks such as Time Machine, Locked and Loaded, Pandemic, which has been the buzzword for the last year, unfortunately. But anyway, this was released in 2010, so it wasn't really written with this in mind. I'm always impressed by these comeback albums, because most of the times, as I said, I'm disappointed, but those few times that I'm not disappointed, that album really remains close to my heart, because it fulfills that gap of that band coming back after all those years and giving us something else which we listen often, and it really fills us with satisfaction. The band also continued releasing albums after this and released another couple of great albums. They have released even another album last year, if I'm not mistaken, which I have yet to listen to, although I have listened to some tracks here and there, and it seems quite good as well. But none of the albums that came after this really reached the level of this one, as far as I'm concerned. If I had to choose a weaker track on here, it would definitely be New World Coming. I think it's kind of a filler track to a certain extent. Not that it is a bad track. I don't generally, if I'm listening to it, I don't generally skip it, but it is that moment when I kind of lose a bit of attention. And considering this album is 67 minutes long, I would have removed that track in order to shorten a bit the length, because most of the time 67 minutes is a bit, once you skip the 1 hour limit, it might be a bit too much. So that is all with regards to this great album. If you don't own this album, you have never listened to it, go check it out. I will leave links in my description for you to follow. They are affiliate links which you can buy the albums from. We get a small commission to no extra expense for you, so that would really help us out to cover a very small part of these expenses held through this channel. Anyway, kudos to Accept for continuing to fork out great albums. They had a bit of a lineup reshuffle recently. Some iconic, some original members have left, but they are still delivering good music. So that is all for this week's Album of the Week. I hope you liked this content. If you feel this was informative and if you liked it, please consider subscribing, as I said, liking this video, sharing this content in order to reach more people, widen the family here on Iron Horde channel. That is all I have left to say. I remind you that you can follow the affiliate links in the description. Until then, stay safe and metal on. Cheers.